We've got a new tutorial to go over here, so let's just dive right in. This, of course, is for After Effects, and we're going to do a little bit of background removal and compositing. And we'll be using mainly the extract effect. And so that's what I want to take a look at here, as I've done some demos on this recently and thought it'd be good to have a nice record of it so that my students and anyone else can review it. So I'm in After Effects, and I've got a little bit of imported footage here. And I'm going to start with this white background footage. So you may know that you can key out things like green screen and blue screen, and there are many great tutorials on YouTube and all over the place about how to do that in After Effects. So you don't need to hear about that from me. But here's a good one about extract. If you need to try and key out a background and it's not blue screen or green screen, because that can come along. So I'm going to drag this footage in here and drop it off to make a new composition. Okay, there we are. And I'm going to show my rulers. Now this is obviously not great footage here. It's not very large, and we have this wonderful watermark here, of course, courtesy of Shutterstock. But I thought it would work well to show some of the issues you'd have with a white background. And this is certainly not improbable that you may have to have something like this and remove the background to put something else in. So before we jump into that, we need to take a look at the color channels. So the color channels are really going to be how extract is going to work to try and remove this background here. And this is going to work very similar to masking in Photoshop. So if you understand those concepts in Photoshop, the same thing should apply here. Now to see the channels in After Effects, you have this little button right here that you can click and show them. But there's a nice keyboard shortcut. So if I hold down Option or Alt on the PC and do 1, that's showing me the red channel. See the little red line here, and this is the information in the red channel. And then 2 is, of course, the green channel. And 3 is the blue channel. And 4 is alpha. And you can see, of course, in this video footage, there is no alpha. It's an MP4 anyway. By the way, a QuickTime movie can contain an alpha channel. So if it did, you'd see it here. So anyway, you can kind of go through this by holding Alt or Option. And then once again, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you want to get back to your RGB, which is what you want to see, then you just hit that same button here. I'm on 3 for blue, so if I do that again, Alt or Option 3, I'm back to that. But the main thing we're looking for in the channels is to see the contrast between what we want to keep, which is the figure, and what we want to get rid of, which is the background. And we look for the most contrast, and I'm seeing that, of course, in the blue channel. So remember that. In this case, we're looking at the blue channel. Okay, back to color, and we're going to go up to Effect and Keying, and there it is, Extract. Okay, so Extract, and we've got this. I'll just take a look at our layer here, Effects. Yep, there it is. Here's something odd with Extract, because it's missing something, and I've seen this every time I start with the extract in our effects controls here. It's chopped off, and I don't know why we have to have it so wide, why it can't fit in, but you're missing some very important information here. So with this far left panel, the effects control, come over here to your rulers. You should have rulers, and just pull this over until there you go. Now we can see the white and the black controls. I'm not sure why it comes that way. Maybe it doesn't for you, but it always does this for me. So remember, we saw the most contrast in the blue channel. So for our channel here that we're looking at, we're going to choose not luminance, and that would just be if the whole RGB were turned to grayscale. And sometimes that might work. Usually you're going to have more contrast in one of the color channels. So go here from luminance, come down here, and pick blue. Great. So here's our blue channel, and we see a histogram. So everyone should, of course, be familiar with histograms. This shows us a big spike of pure white, which is the background here, and there's a little bit of very light gray highlight stuff. That's probably some of this words here, and a little bit in the face. And then we have kind of a mid-tone little hump there, and that I'm sure is the figure. and there's no pure black. So what we want to do here is to start removing this background. You want to start where you want to remove, and of course in this case it's the white. You want to grab here at the slider and start pulling it over. Now any slightest little bit away from 255, 255 white is going to, of course, make it transparent. And as we can see here, there are a decent amount of compression artifacts, and because this is sort of low res, it'll be junky, but it should work enough for our demonstration. You want to take and sort of pull this over until you get rid of the white. And that looks pretty good. Now if I zoom in here, you can see that the alpha, or the transparency I have, is either 0 over here, completely transparent, or 100% here, completely opaque. There is nothing in between. And that's not going to be a good key. So we want to have some grays in our eventual matte or levels of transparency. If you were to look at this, it would be just black and white. In fact, I can do that with, if I do option 4, there's my alpha, right? Black and white. And there's nothing, no anti-aliasing or grays in between. Okay. So that's because this, these two sliders here on the white side are completely vertical. That means there's no distinction or gradation between black and white. So what we want to do here is take this bottom one and pull it back out so that we have a bit of an angle. And if we do that, now you have some subtleties of gradation in between the black and white. And if I were to look at the alpha channel now, there it is. So you can see that's what I'm talking about. Here is, you know, your complete white, so that's 100%. Here's your 0, which is black for transparency. And then there are some anti-aliasing bits along the edge. And that's what you're looking for. The softer your edge, the more grays you'll need there. So I'll zoom back out here to see the whole thing. And, you know, where do you want to go with this? Well, it's kind of a bit of a balance, a bit of a compromise. If you go too far, you see you start losing some opacity there. I'm seeing black just because this is my composition background color. There's a nice little button right here, which if you click that, that will show you your transparency grid. So that can be helpful, or you can use whatever color you want. And you know, how far you pull this and how angled you get it really is going to depend on how much of a soft edge you need. Now I don't want to lose stuff in here, so what I'm going to have to do is kind of, you know, pull that back out to bring in some of this. And I'm going to kind of ignore this watermark because ideally it wouldn't be there, right? And so we want to kind of play around with this right here. So as I zoom and I look in, you know, that edge is pretty good. There's some white there, but it's going to be tough to really get rid of all that since she's against such a bright white background. And we can maybe find ways of dealing with that later on. If I were to really try and get all of it, I would lose some definition here. And look what's happening. I'm just going to play this and see, oh, that's not good. So of course the teeth are not pure white, but they're light enough to where they fall in that kind of very, very light grayscale range. There'd be somewhere in here. Maybe the teeth are probably right in here, and that's what I'm losing. So as I lose this background here, I'm losing stuff inside. Well, what are we going to do about that? The nice thing is After Effects has provided some great tools that can help out here. Usually pulling a good matte is going to be more than a one-step process. So let's kind of see what we can do here to help us out. We're going to need to maybe duplicate this layer and do some different effects on it. So often your final result might be more than one layer of footage. So I'll come down here to my layer, and I can even put a bit more room right here. Come down here to my layer, and I'm going to do Command D to duplicate it. Of course, Control D on the PC. And on this duplicate layer, and I'll even turn off the bottom one so that we can sort of see there. On this duplicate layer, I'm going to bring the white kind of back up here so that we're bringing in some of those holes, trying to fill in some of these holes in these lighter highlight areas in the eyes, right? So So I'm trying to bring that in, and of course what's happening is I'm getting too much stuff happening here. But I'm going to try and fill in some of these areas here and create what we'd call a core matte. This is your core, and it does not include the edge. So if I can fill this stuff in here, that's what we can do. So I've expanded out the white, so we see more of that right here. But now I need to see if I can kind of bring this in and not have it mess up my edge here and add more junk along the edge than I want. And we can do that by a process called choking. We're going to choke the mask. So on this top layer here, I'll go back up to Effect, and under Keying, I see Matte. Under Matte, we have a simple choker. Now, choking or expanding a mask is a really important and very needed skill in all sorts of keying operations. So I'm going to hit Simple Choker, and there we go, there's my choker. Now the interesting thing is the choker can not just choke, it'll do just the opposite, which is expand the mask. So if I take this this little slider here, and if I do, oddly enough, a negative number, that's expanding the mask. Well, that's just the opposite of what I want. I want to choke it, so I'm going to go this way, and you see what that does? That brings it in there. See that? Brings it in. And so it's actually, you know, I'm bringing in some of this white stuff right in here, but because that's messing up my edge, I'm going to choke that and bring it in and have it be more of a core. So let's go back to the home here, and you can see right like that, there is my kind of my final right there, and there's the one that's the core that's kind of choked in. So you see that? And so the combination of both of them is going to kind of give me what I need. So if I, you know, going to fine tune these mats here. If I zoom in and look at this edge, you know, on this bottom one, and I might even rename this. I'll hold the Enter, and we can call this. I'll just call this mask, and then this top one, I'll call that core. There we go. And so on the bottom one here, that's giving me the edge. You know, can I pull that in a little bit more and try and get rid of some of this, you know, stuff along the edge there, so I'm not having too much white. All right. And then on my core is that kind of putting that back in. So I can see that it is, you know, somewhat putting it back in. In fact, if I click on this, let's turn this one off, and again, I'm going to do option 4. That's my core matte. Here's my outer matte giving me some good definition on the edges, and the top one is my core matte that's pulled in and is filling up more stuff right here. So, you know, that's looking pretty good. Can I, of course, we have some holes here, right? Can I pull this out so that I try to fill those holes up? See that as I'm pulling back to add more of these lighter values and get it closer to white. Let's see what that looks like. And see, does that help me out there? You know, that does help, and it's filling in some of these holes here. So overall, looking pretty good, of course, except for these really bright areas here. And that's going to be a problem if you have a white background. Some parts of the face, like around the eyes and the teeth, are going to be light enough values to where you can't distinguish them from the background here. But, you know, so far so good. We can do something else here. What I'm going to do here is go back to my first frame, and I'm going to duplicate this this top layer once again. So Command or Control D. There we go. And this one I'm going to call this mask. Nope, it's already called mask. Let's see. I'm going to call this articulated mask. And I think this bottom one, I'm going to rename that and call that matte. It's a bit of a difference in After Effects. So here's what I'll do with this inner one. I'm going to, for the very top one, I'm going to turn off both extract and the simple choker. So here's my footage with no keying or anything at all. So I've got the full amount of information in the face. And what I'm going to do is, to get rid of that, I'm going to create an articulated mask with the pen tool. So make sure you're on this layer, get the pen tool, and just kind of really quickly, I'm going to define an area right here in the face that should bring back these parts that I'm missing. And there we go. See that? So now this layer on the top has just that. So this brings in these white areas here, so I'm not really missing anything. Now, let's just take a look. If I scrub through this right there, and she's not moving very much, you can see my mask stays still, but uh-oh, there's something happened. Yep. See out there? She moves enough to where I've got some of this white background coming in. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to animate or articulate this mask. And that's where we get the term articulated mask. So to do that, open up this layer, and there you see masks, and open up that again. There's my mask once again. It's add for the default. Open that again, and we have mask path. There we go. And so I'm going to have to animate this mask so it moves along with her face. This is kind of getting close to rotoscoping, but this is really an articulated core mask or matte. So I'll come here where it's all looking fine and still working, and maybe about here she starts to move out. So I'm going to go about here, I think, and I'm going to turn on the keyframing. So click the little stopwatch, and there's my first keyframe. Now with any type of articulated mask, you want to keyframe and tween as much as possible and do manual work as little as possible. So I'm going to try and see how far out this goes. And it looks like maybe there is about as far out as it goes. So what I want to do is, I'm animating the mask path with my selection tool. I'll double click on the mask and just move it over so it's back there on the face. And then when I double click, of course, I get the bounding box, and I can position it, scale it, even rotate it, do all sorts of things. Okay. Double click again on that bounding box, and now it's back to here. I could also, of course, click on each individual point and animate them individually. So let's see if this is working fine. We want to keep that in the face there. So far, so good. And so we have some movement. I'm just scrubbing along here to see, do I need to, oh, there we go, there's some more. So here's where it starts to move out. I'm going to put a keyframe there. There's my add a keyframe button. And now I'm going to scrub out and see where it's the farthest away. And that's going to be about there. So again, I'll double click on the mask. And this time maybe I'll just try scaling it. I'll pull that in, scale it. And I don't have to, but let me pull it out here a little bit more so I make sure I don't lose the eyes. So when you're animating a mask, you want to try and animate and do keyframing for large transformations like this first. Position, scale, and rotation. And see if that works, because the bigger movements are going to work better, especially for rotoscoping. And then if you have to, then you get in and you animate individual points, which, because of our keying, this is just a really rough articulated mask. We're not really going to have to do true rotoscoping here. So we'll pull this out, just kind of keep going, and it looks like that is going to be okay. Go to the end, and that's really kind of close there. It's fine, but it makes me a little bit nervous. So I'm going to double click on this and then just sort of move this away a little bit so it's not that close to the face, and maybe pull it in a bit like that. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we have an articulated mask, and you see I've got a few very small number of keyframes here, and of course After Effects is tweening the position and also the size, and anything I did to the mask, it's tweening it right there. So I mean, that's it. We've really removed the background and done a decent job of keying and done some extra steps of choking and then a little articulated mask to make it work. And just in case you're wondering, whenever you're on this layer here that has a mask, the mask path is visible. This nice button right here will turn off that mask path if it's kind of getting in the way. Okay, so at this point we could do a kind of a really simple A over B composite, and I have another bit of footage right here. So we'll just zoom out a bit, and I'll close up this layer and maybe the bottom one as well to see I've got 3 layers, right, where I'm using 3 layers to get my background removal. And I'll drag and I'll put this image here, or this footage, behind it. There we go. Now this is a pretty large bit of footage, as you can see. It's more of a normal size, whereas this one's really small. So I could kind of scale it down, or I could just kind of move it and put it, into position here, and we'll kind of see what happens. So notice, I'll go home, there we are, and it's just a footage of some sky here, and we've got some birds eventually, right? There we go. So we've got some birds flying past there. So there are some birds flying in the background of the sky, and that's always kind of a nice little element to have. Oh, there goes another bird right there, and off it goes, and so on. Oh, there's more birds. There they are. See? Okay, so now this is the A over B, but it's not really a good composite yet because this image isn't looking very good, and it looks obviously removed from a white background, and it doesn't quite fit in. So the job of compositing really is to make it look like it fits. So I want to do some type of color correction. I want to maybe fix the edge, do some things here with this image, right? This footage. Except it's 1, 2, 3 different layers. And if I want to do things to it like transform it or put a filter on it or color correct it, it's kind of tough with it being 3 different layers, each one with different settings. So what I'd like to see if I can have these 3 layers here all put together into one layer, and that makes it a lot easier for me to work with. And I can do that by a process called pre-composing. And pre-composing is so important in After Effects and really helpful for visual effects work. So highly recommend it. In fact, with some things you're just not going to be able to do it really without pre-composing. So I'll show you what I mean if you're unfamiliar with this. I'm going to select one and shift select and get all 3. Going to make sure all 3 are selected, and then I'll right click on it. This isn't the only way, but I like doing it this way, and choose pre-compose right there. This is making what we call a pre-comp. And so the pre-comp right here, it says move all attributes into the new composition. And this other one, leave attributes, and this is my main composition. It doesn't work like that because they all have different attributes. In this case, the default works, it usually works. So we'll just kind of do that. And the attributes mean whatever's on that layer. Effects, transformations, masks, whatever. We're going to move all that into the new composition and say OK. Now look, what used to be 3 layers is now just 1 layer, and that's much easier to work with. And so don't worry, all that stuff is still there. If you need to access it, just double click here on your pre-comp, and look, here I am inside the pre-comp. Notice how that other background's gone, and there are the 3 layers. So now my main composition, which is here, holds this one pre-comp or pre-composition right in there. And having pre-comps in your main composition and even pre-comps within pre-comps is a great way to work. Really important in After Effects. So I'll go back into my main composition, and now that I have this, I can do some things with it. What do I want to do? Well, first, let's see if we can have it match the background a little bit more. So we're going to want to do a color correction, and I'll go up here to my effect, and we'll go to color corrections. Curves, that's always kind of good. So let's do curves, and let's see if maybe I can darken her down a bit, but also I want to cool her down because it's very, very blue in the background. So what I might do then is if you go to curves with RGB and you work in the RGB channels and you pull that down, that's going to darken, that's fine. But if I want to adjust channels individually, I can come here to red, green, blue, right? So if I go to red and I pull the red down, I'm reducing the red. Notice how she's getting kind of green. By the way, skin tones, which are kind of yellow-orange, no matter who you are, what the racial background is, it's a combination of red and green. So as you pull down the red, you get, less warm. And if I go now to my green, I'll pull down the green, and so that's looking a little better, but it's getting closer to the red there. So I can go back to the red. Let's kind of pull that red down, and that really kind of cools it down. Right? And I might even go to my blue, and I'll add some blue. I want to be a little bit careful because as you go up, you're going to be brightening values. I don't want to really brighten her that much. So I'll just kind of go up a little bit and get some blue in there. So that's looking a little better. Now if I turn this off, you can see there's the before and there's the after. So that is looking better. And doing color adjustments like this really is something that's been necessary for compositing. Let's see if we can do something about this edge. Now it's not going to be great because of course of the watermark, and we see a little bit of it kind of blobbing out here beyond her jawline. There's really nothing to do unless I wanted to go in and hand roto that out. And also because it's a small low-res footage, it's not going to have many pixels to work with. But we can still do something. Now here's a bit of a cheat, a little trick here, but I like doing it in Photoshop and it works well in After Effects as well. If you're familiar with layer styles in After Effects, look at here in Photoshop or After Effects, it's really all the same. So if I go to Layer, I come down here to Layer Styles. And there's one that I like using a lot, whether it's Photoshop for illustration or After Effects here, and it is an inner glow. Let's take a look at that one right there, inner glow. So I'm going to put an inner glow on this layer, and you can see that by default, I'll kind of scroll down here, there's my layer style, there's inner glow, okay. It's screen, and I don't really want that, I don't want to brighten it up. And you can see the color, this is something like that. I'm going to click the eyedropper and I'm going to pull a blue from this background here. Okay, now it's blue, but it's still screen. Screen, of course, is good for highlights, and it's brightening up this this outline here, or this edge. But I don't want to do that. But the nice thing is you can change the blend mode of your inner glow. So I'll check screen and change it, and let's try, say, multiply. Wow, look at multiply, and look how it takes away that bright white, bright white edge there. That's that's kind of cool. Let's see. Let's take the size up a bit. We need a bigger size. There's my size. So we'll take the size up. That's kind of good. Now it's way too much. It looks like there's kind of paint on it or something. So I could take the opacity down, and maybe just kind of give myself a little more room to work with here. I can take the opacity down until where it's looking good. That is not bad at all for getting rid of that white and kind of making her blend into the background a bit more. But you can also try other blending modes. And here's some things you might want to look at. Here's overlay, and overlay looks a bit too bright. Here's soft light, okay, and here is hard light. Hard light's kind of nice as well. You can also try things like hue and color, and that'll give you kind of a tint there. But because this edge is so white, we're going to need to go for color, and there we kind of see some blue. But I'm still seeing that kind of white edge there, so I'm going to go back to, let's look at hard light. Okay, that's better. Might even try vivid light. That's not bad, but let's go to multiply. That still might be my favorite. Multiply with a low opacity. Now something else is, as if you put stuff together here, you kind of want to think about your light source. And this is kind of an indirect lighting back here, but obviously it's lighter on this side of the sky. So I could surmise light's coming from this way. And there's a little bit of a hint of a light there. And so I'm going to try another little trick. It's another layer style. So I'll go back up to layer and go to my layer style, and I'm going to add what is called an inner shadow. Okay, doesn't that look awful? Well, here is the thing to know, is that glows don't have to be bright, we've seen that, and shadows don't have to be dark. The default is multiply with black, and I wouldn't use black for a shadow anyway. I always like to have some color. But I'm going to click my eyedropper here and pick up lighter blue from this background here. Okay, there we go. And now here's the trick. I'm going to change that from multiply. Now maybe I'll try screen. There we go. And so now we're getting something that's bright. And that's a bit too much. Let's see what we can do here. Angle. I want to change the angle so that it's only kind of coming from one side. And see things here, we have distance and choke and all that, and size, just like in Photoshop. So I'm going to take my size down and make it a little bit of a sharper one. Obviously we can't do 0. Got to have some little bit of sharpness there. And I'm going to take my distance down. Okay. And now let's try the angle. I want to adjust that. There we go. So it's kind of coming from the left and a bit from the bottom. Okay, that's kind of nice. And you can see what it's doing is I'm trying to see if I can kind of match up a little bit with this bit of light on her cheek to kind of continue that along this edge. Now it looks kind of a bit too harsh and unnatural. What's my size? 3. Let's make the size 2. Okay? And we're going to take this opacity way down. So it's just kind of subtle. All right. So, you know, that's not too bad. Let's see here if I turn off that inner shadow. There is without it. There is with it. You know, it kind of helps because she's got a little bit of a little rim light, just a little bit hitting the side of that face. And I can continue that along the head and along the ear just a little bit. You know, there's screen. Let's try some other brightening ones. There's color dodge. Color dodge is kind of nice for illuminated things. That might be a little bit too much here. There's also linear dodge, which is also called add. And that's kind of like screen, but it's really, really bright. So I'll just go back to screen. That will work fine on this one, I think. And just a little bit of subtle something going on there. Okay? And yeah, that's fine. Let's zoom out and go back to my first frame. And so that's kind of what we have happening there. See that? So, you know, working kind of nicely. And again, the only way I could really do this is by pre-composing these 3 layers so I can work on them as one element. Let's see something else that I might be able to do as their one element or one pre-comp. What if I do something like I want to animate it? What would I do? Well, you know, let's click P for position. In my first frame here, I'll click to add a keyframe, and maybe I'll move her kind of, you know, down off the screen here. And then as we go along here, and there's some movement, and some birds are flying by, maybe to like about here. Now I can maybe move her up into position here. So, you know, why is that happening? I don't know. But just kind of show you, you know, we just got something going on like this, right? She's gradually rising up from wherever, right, into this little background here. Okay, so you know that's kind of fun. And what other fun could we have here? Well, as I'm just seeing this, I'm kind of wondering, what about these birds? So just as an idea, I'm going to take this bird's movie clip. And I'm going to duplicate that layer, and I'll put that on top. Why am I doing that? Well, let's take a look at the channels. So there's my red, my green, and my blue. So if I want to say maybe get rid of this sky and keep the birds, what do I have with the greatest amount of contrast? It is obviously the blue. So why would I do that? Well, let's try this here. I'm on my top layer with the birds. I'll zoom in so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, and go back to Effect, and we'll get the keying and extract. And let's extract the sky out of this layer and see if we can have these birds here. So once again, go down to the channel you want, blue, and we can see this big peak right here. That's the sky, and this darker value right here, that's going to be the birds and maybe some of the clouds. So as I pull back here and I make the sky transparent, look what I have. I can have the birds in front of her. right? And so I want to pull this back here because there's a lot of blurriness and a lot of softness in those birds, a lot of motion blur happening. And so I want to see if I can really kind of make them go in front of her there. And because there's so much softness here, see all the blur and softness and levels of transparency, as opposed to kind of the harsh edge against her, that means I'm going to want to have a greater spread or angle here between these 2 points. So let me do something like that, and that's going to give a lot of softness there. Okay, so if I zoom out, what do we have happening here? So here's my initial scene. There's the sky. Here she is rising up, from wherever, smiling because she's so happy. And we see the birds kind of flying by, and oh, wait a minute, now one's flying in front of her face, so maybe she's this gigantic being or something. And then we have some more birds flying across like that. And so as I'm looking at this, now the birds, of course, are really blue, and maybe just for fun, I'll take and do a little bit of color correction on those. And if I have just really easy here, hue saturation, let me just try and desaturate those birds a little bit so they're less blue. Let's see, is that going to work there? That's a little better. So now they're a bit less blue, and can I kind of fine-tune this a bit more and get some more soft edge as they're going across there. Let's see here. Now look at that. That looks pretty good. Look at that soft motion blur as they fly across her. Pretty fun stuff here. So there go the birds, and here they come, and flying right across like that. And so there's just a fun little compositing project. Go away again. All right, so just a fun little compositing project, and we're doing this all with extract. The reason we're using extract is it's not a blue screen or green screen type of footage, but we're using some commonly available footage, which is going to be, say, sky. Blue sky works well to extract things from, and then of course a white background, which is kind of commonly used. So just a fun little project to show you how you can use extract if you don't have a blue screen, green screen situation, and some things that you might do here, especially working with pre-composing to bring your various elements together and then kind of fine-tuning them to make them work with the background. So I hope you liked that and found it enjoyable. Try a little project like this and just kind of see what fun and crazy things you can come up with. Until next time.